Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid is feeling emboldened to some extent coming out of what most people see as just an amazing victory on the part of the Democrats coming out of the government shutdown, the attempt to defund Obamacare, and all of that. And so he's headed back to Nevada, and he was being interviewed on the radio there talking about how the negotiation process will go forward from this point based on the victory that Harry Reid, the other Democrats, and Obama had during the shutdown fight. So we're going to cover a couple of different subjects here. First, Harry Reid is talking about sort of the Tea Party caucus in the GOP right now and how crazy they've become. Let's listen.
You know, it's really hard to try to be rational and logical with people who are illogical and not rational. We have a bunch of insane people in the House of Representatives. And we found that they voted 45 times the same vote, always the same result, to defund Obamacare. That's what I was dealing with.
And so that's something that we've pointed out many times, and thankfully he at least notices that that's going on and realizes how crazy it is.
Yeah, and to me the more important part here is that the Democrats, and embodied by Harry Reid here, seem so much more emboldened to take these guys on. And he's saying, look, before calling them crazy, the Republicans would have come in and demanded apologies, there would have been teary apologies, there would have been censures in the Senate, etc. Now he's just like, look, they're lunatics, I'm moving on, right? So that's good rhetoric to begin with. And then he talks about how they're going to get tough on negotiations. That's more relevant.
Yeah, exactly. And so talking both about his strategy in the negotiations, and also I love his sort of psychological evaluation of Obama and how he likes to negotiate. So let's listen to that.
This is a very different set of affairs from 2010, when Democrats made concessions in renewing the Bush tax cuts that year. There were even a few concessions made in 2012. Do you wish, looking back at it, that you had said no concessions in those earlier negotiations?
Yes.
Wow.
All right.
Why so? Why so? Is it just kind of
because if you deal with a bully, if you give a bully $1 today, they want $1.50 tomorrow. You cannot do business with bullies, and it's taken a while for all my caucus to come to that understanding. And I think, quite frankly, the president, the wonderful man that he is, doesn't like confrontation, and he likes to work things out with people.
So was he too lenient in those earlier negotiations then?
The president feels very good about having stuck to our guns and doing the right thing.
So the president was too lenient in those earlier conversations?
Listen, I was part of the deal too. I was too lenient. Don't blame it all on him.
I kind of wish one thing that they could have thrown in there is they talk about the concessions as if he gave up something. But like making the tax cuts permanent, the sequestration process over the next decade, like they just say concessions, just such a euphemism. That bothers me.
Yeah. Well, look, so you get a sense of the scope of what John's saying. President Obama and the Democrats agreed to make, revenue-wise, 94% of the Bush tax cuts permanent. 94%, okay? And Bush couldn't make them permanent. He had to put a deadline on it, otherwise they wouldn't agree to it. Obama made 94% of them permanent.
6% change, that's better than usual.
Right, it's 1% better than usual for Obama. So now I'm sensing a totally different Harry Reid here. I know, like, first of all, even that yes was strong.
It was like, yes. Like I don't need to explain this away. I don't need to equivocate on this. Just yes.
Yes, we did not do that right, and next time we're coming for you, right? And then second of all, he's doing a series of interviews now. This is the second one I've seen where he's being patronizing towards the president and to his own caucus a little bit in an effort to take credit for himself. But he's right, and he deserves that credit, and I'm kind of glad he's doing it. Where he's like, the president's a nice man. In other words, he's the one that's been weak, and I've let him be weak for too long, but I stepped in, I regulated, and now we've taken a stand together. That's what he's saying between the lines, and I generally agree with him.
I don't read that.
Yeah, and I don't know. Isn't the part of the president's role to be a negotiator? I mean, you can't just not be willing to negotiate under any terms. Now, I agree with you, John. I think those Bush concessions were just extreme and show just how weak Obama was in terms of leverage politically at that time. Now, the Republicans made this almost easy, right? Like they don't have to give hardly anything. But I do think Harry Reid has to be careful here. This tone of I won, you got to play that really carefully because although public opinion's clear and that the Republicans look much, much worse in this situation coming out of the shutdown and everything than the Dems. People are still hurting and pissed, so you don't want to seem too glad about everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as long as you couch what you want in terms of that you're going to give the people who are tired and struggling and hurting, that there's going to be an upside to them.
For them.
In the fact that
you don't want to seem gloaty.
That your victory means something to them, not something to him.
Yeah, it just can't be political.
You know, for years, Cenk, what we've mostly argued about, you and I, is, you know, we have a lot of pointless arguments about intent, arguments that will never be settled because we'll never know, and ultimately, I don't think they're that interesting either. But I think what we get wrong, and let's start with what you get wrong, because that's my favorite thing. But I think what the show gets wrong, and including myself in that, just like Harry Reid, I'm including myself in your fuck up. But we get wrong that, like, the good politicians, and I don't mean the good-hearted politicians, I mean the ones who are skilled at this job. Like, there are things that we miss, that we end up hammering them for, that they're playing a longer game but on little things. Like the minutia of it, we miss, and sometimes there's such good explanations for stuff that seems egregious, but they just need to get to next week. What we're unquestionably right about is the bigger thing. What you were mostly right about is the bigger thing. And I think that, and hopefully this is a sign, and I think it's what you're seeing, is that President Obama, for such a long time, and most members of the Senate, including Harry Reid, they didn't get the thing. It wasn't 1987. It wasn't 1997. That it had changed. And what was clear to you and what you were screaming about before anybody else, which was this playing field has moved legitimately and they're playing you. You're not going to negotiate something good with these guys. And maybe it took them literally almost, took the Republicans risking such an enormous financial crisis for it to finally occur to Harry Reid, what you and I, but mostly you, have been saying for 7 years. Like, they're nuts, for the love of God. And that's what you're hoping for, is that they finally, not just on this one issue, but they figured that out long term.
Wait, I missed what I was wrong about.